Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Another Thin Man is over. The good are often alone.
Mommy, this is Creep's binder. Remember?
Creeps, yeah, Creeps, you remember? Nick sent me up the river.
Oh, well, it's nice you don't feel bad about it.
Well, why should I? Gee, it took a genius to outsmart me.
You want to touch me?
I got rid of all those reporters.
What'd you tell them?
Told them we were out of scotch.
What a gruesome thought.
Andy, it's the Thin Man, but not the next one. It's another one.
That's another.
Yeah, another Thin Man. Here we go. We're back with Powell and Loy, and I love them. I love them. I love them. I am Will Ferrell in Elf. I love you. I love you. I love you. They are so funny and so fun. I had never seen this movie. And coming off hot on the heels of the next Thin Man, it was a delight to come back to Powell and Loy doing this character. I have feelings.
Hot on the heels of After the Thin Man.
Of course, After the Thin Man. This is the problem with their naming scheme. It's already rearing its ugly, ugly head.
Which Thin Man is this? Yeah, no, I hear you.
All right. So that's where we are with the Thin Man. What'd you think of it?
I like it. I don't like it as much as the first two films. Everything felt a little tamer, and I don't know if that's just because they were parents now, but like the drinking was... there was still some drinking, but there was like never drunkenness.
No.
And the comedy also didn't strike me as at the same level as the previous two films. Like it had its moments, but it never made me laugh out loud.
I think that's a fair assessment. Although I have to say there were still some moments that felt shocking to me. When they're walking through the woods and find the sliced up dog, that felt shocking to me for this movie. So it took funny swings. And I also think that there were issues with the actual caper itself. Like I have opinions about it, but I find William Powell and Myrna Loy, I am so on team these two. Right? Like I just love Nick and Nora and I love spending time with them. So at this point, even a movie that isn't as good as the first two movies, I still just enjoy hanging out with these people. These are two people that I would love to have dinner and drinks with. That's what I'm saying.
Do you like Nick and Nora better than Dick and Dora? Do you remember Dick and Dora? You should. You like that movie a lot more than I do.
Wait, who was Dick and Dora? Why can't I remember what you're talking about?
That's the spoof version of the characters in Murder by Death.
Oh, that's okay. I did like that movie a lot more than you did, for sure. And yes, I think I like Nick and Nora more. I think that's safe to say.
It was, what was it, Maggie Smith and
oh, that's a test.
David Niven.
Yeah.
Yep. Dick and Dora Charleston. Another Thin Man, when it was released back in 1939, it passed the certification. Once again, this is the period where they just plain up pass. Okay, before we start...
Sure.
I want to just say a couple things that of which I was unaware.
Well, it's your special day, Andy. You should do whatever you want.
First off, W.S. Van Dyke is actually W.S. Van Dyke II. And I didn't know that until the credits of this film, because I don't think in the previous two films, I think he was just credited as W.S. Van Dyke, correct? Like, was I crazy with that?
No, I don't think you're crazy. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, so because this one came up, W.S. Van Dyke the second, and one, it's not junior, it's the second, which is very rare to see. And so I was a little perplexed, and so I actually had to go to IMDb and look him up, and lo and behold, he actually is Woodbridge Strong Van Dyke the second, and that is in fact his full name. It's just in the film world, he so often went by W.S. Van Dyke, I suppose, that's just how he's often called, even though there are times like this where he's credited as W.S. Van Dyke II. Isn't that interesting?
That's interesting. How do you have any seconds, thirds in your family lineage?
No.
That's very interesting. I don't either. But I had to look this up because our friend Tommy Handsome the third, there are rules about this. Do you know what the rules are?
Well, I do, only because we talked about them on our other show, Marvel Movie Minute. But why don't you tell everybody about the rules? Honestly,
I was
if there's
trying
a
to
rule
do a
regarding
casual segue because you were involved in that conversation. I was giving you an opportunity to actually entree that conversation.
Well, no, because I thought one thing that we didn't talk about in that conversation that I thought perhaps you were going to bring up is juniors versus seconds, because that never came up. We were talking more about thirds and how, surprising all of us, apparently there's a rule that if you're a third, and you can only be a third if all three of the generations are alive, first, second, and third. And if first dies, then second becomes first, and third actually becomes second. That was a bonkers rule that none of us had ever heard of.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So thank Miss Manners for that. But was there a junior versus second rule?
Yes, there is. There's a junior versus second rule. Absolutely. So junior is used for a baby boy who has the same name as his father, while second can be used across, like, skipping generations. So there can be a second, even if the father's name isn't the same as the son's. The son could be named after the grandfather and be a second. That's the rule. A junior relationship is only father-son. A second, third can be across generations.
Wow.
What do you think about that? How about them apples?
Interesting. That is really interesting. Okay. Well,
they do also say, however, back to this whole like death in the family thing that we discovered, that if a junior would have been a junior and is born after the death of the father, then it isn't a junior at all. It's immediately a second.
Okay. Well, interestingly enough, I guess this wouldn't necessarily apply because W.S. Van Dyke's father died the day after he was born.
Oh, I see.
But that shouldn't.
Yeah, so he would have been a 24-hour junior.
That's what. Right.
Okay.
Right,
well,
right.
Anyway, that's name stuff. I did not notice that was changed between seconds and nothing in these films. Maybe he also read Miss Manners' book between the production of these two movies.
Well, it'll be interesting to see moving forward which of the future films ends up being W.S. Van Dyke versus W.S. Van Dyke the second.
The second.
Yeah.
And when he becomes the first.
Yeah. W.S. Van Dyke, since we're on the W.S. Van Dyke train, just a few other things. His nickname, One Take Woody.
Yes.
One Take Woody, because he lived up to his sobriquet, One Take Woody, by steadfastly adhering to his credo of shooting each scene as quickly and efficiently as possible. He directed over 90 different things, and apparently because of the way he worked, he ended up saving the studios tons of money. So, he was one of those guys that worked well in the studio system. Sadly, and we'll talk about this as we get to the end of this series, because he doesn't direct the last film because he was diagnosed with heart disease and cancer. And because of that, he ended up committing suicide in February 1943.
Oof. Well, that is one bit of sadness. The second, back to your point about One Take Woody, this was complicated because of William Powell's situation at the time. He was not healthy and was dealing with severe rectal cancer at the time, and was dealing with he had a colostomy bag, and all of those things that he was dealing with put a severe strain on his ability to commit to One Take Woody's schedule, and he was down to 6-hour workdays negotiated, which was something that nobody wanted, but he was just not able to. Powell was just not able to live up to that, which definitely puts a bit of a strain on Van Dyke's process.
And not only that, but I didn't know this about William Powell, but he had. What year was it? It was after this series started. I think it was 1935, actually. That's what it was. He made his first picture with Jean Harlow, and they clicked and became engaged. And then a couple years later, they were filming Double Wedding, or he was filming Double Wedding. Harlow became ill and taken to the hospital and died. And her death put him in quite the tailspin. And, he had to take 6 weeks off of the movie that he was working on and had to travel. He didn't make a movie for a year because of that. So all of that happened right between these two movies. I think that happened, I want to say, it must have been after, because Double Wedding he did with Myrna Loy after the another Thin Man, the one we talked about last week. But then they took a break from that, and then he took a year off, and then dealing with the rectal cancer and everything. I mean, he had a very, very difficult time. And that's why if you watch the trailer for this particular film, it actually welcomes him back to the screen. And that was kind of a surprise. And that seeing the trailer is what led me down this rabbit hole of what happened to William Powell? And it's a
couple of hard years in there.
Yeah, very, very difficult time for him. So.
And, how much of that do you think has to play into just the performance. Like I go back and forth on whether or not the strain of his personal life was impacting the kind of humor he was able to portray on screen versus what was written on the page. Like, was this just a situation where a talented man's exhaustion got in the way of delivering what the intended message was for the film? Like, there's some of that. Like, when it feels like some of the comedy didn't live up to the other two movies, how much of that do you think was him struggling?
I think that there's definitely something there. I mean, it's the same, it's Francis Goodrich and Albert Hackett again writing the script based on the characters by Dashiell Hammett. So, in fact, it's loosely based on the story The Farewell Murder that Dashiell Hammett wrote. So, I mean, so it's the same team. And again, we talked about W.S. Van Dyke directing again. So I don't know. I mean, I didn't feel like the comedy was necessarily there anyway. Is that because they were adapting this other story, The Farewell Murder, and kind of putting it into this Thin Man world? Or is it because William Powell was not feeling as energetic to go do stuff? I mean, he didn't seem like he was moving as much. Like, he had a lot more walking and looking that I noticed this time. So I don't know. It's interesting to I guess think about now, like how much of this particular performance is affected by everything that had been going on with him.
The other thing that I have an issue with in this particular movie that I didn't have an issue with in the last film was the mystery itself. Since you dropped Hammett, we need to talk about Hammett, because he was notoriously unreliable to the studio, and in fact, just the following year ends up selling the rights to the Thin Man to the studio outright. He was a drunk and felt like, and to me, this story felt his machinations going into Hackett and Goodrich's pen didn't live up to the last two movies. I felt like this was kind of a weaker mystery. How'd the mystery hit you?
Yeah, first of all, as I was watching it, I realized, I had seen this one before. Back when we were doing our series on films from 1939, I saw that there was this film that had also been released from 1939. So that's when I watched after The Thin Man and Another Thin Man, just to kind of like get a sense of the Thin Man world at this time in 1939. And so I had seen this, but I'd largely forgotten it. And I guess that kind of spoke to me of the sense of the story. And even with the mystery, like I was like, yeah, and again, spoiler alert with these shows, we're going to be really spoiling the hell out of these murder mysteries. But I kind of pinned it pretty easy from the beginning as to who done it. Oh, it's the girl. But you're right. There was a lot of other machinations going on with Church and his whole story. And then you had the disappearing nanny and things like that didn't tie up as cleanly as the past characters did in the other stories.
That was exactly my feel. Like, it just felt it felt thin, Andy.
Just like a thin man.
I regret that. There were things that I thought were fun and funny. Like, I liked the baby party. I think that's a goofy way to live up to the level of humor of the past movies, having all the thugs come in with all their babies and having one of them renting a baby for $1 a day. Like, those kinds of things felt like super narratively frivolous and were on the level of the dog romance story in the second film. Like, I just thought that was enough to give me a superficial laugh in the end. And then it became kind of we go back to some of the similar stages of the other movie where we have, Powell, pacing an apartment quietly looking for things, looking for holes in walls and plaster again, this time a bullet hole. And I thought that was really fun stuff, but a little bit played. Like, we've been down this particular road.
You're right. I liked the bits of Powell doing his detective work, exploring, looking around in the room, like when he was exploring the one apartment and those guys came in. Like, there were a lot of those bits that they worked for me. The issues that kind of tie into a lot of these problems that we had are things like suddenly these two guys crawling through the window. And there's really never any context about any of these guys. Like, there's those two guys, there's the guys that come into the Cabana Club. And this happens a number of times with these people, and it's all written off as just kind of an out in that final conversation about how Church and Vogel had their own men kind of watching Nick as he was doing stuff. And it's just like, I don't know. It just was like, okay, so now you just have a bunch of random thugs running around, and it kind of confused the matter a lot.
Yeah, I think so too. It definitely made it harder to trace back the pieces of the story that lead to the final mystery, solving the final mystery. And I think that's the point you were making earlier, that it's just not as satisfying because of all of these threads that don't make a lot of sense even on rewatch to me.
Yeah.
So
right.
Okay. Well, now that we've done that, how do you want to walk through the rest of the story?
Okay, so we talked about the plot. I guess let's just talk about the characters a little bit. So first, we could just talk more about Nick and Nora as far as they're a couple. She's again, well, and we should say they're back in New York. They're over in Long Island now. So, I mean, they're kind of bouncing all over the country. I'm not sure. It didn't seem like any particular reason. Well, it had been a year since he was born. It was almost his first birthday. I mean, his first birthday happens in the film pretty much. So, and the end of the last film, they're just pregnant. So I don't know, a year and a half or so. But again, so they're back in New York. I don't know. I don't get much of a sense as far as like the moving forward of their relationship. It's fine. They both seem parental. They're definitely, of money, where they have nannies and everyone pretty much doing all the baby care. And she kind of still wants to help Nick, and he kind of still does his things where he tricks her to leave her behind. And so I don't know. I guess as far as the way that their relationship is depicted, I still love the two of them on screen. I love how they're portrayed. So I don't know. I don't know if it's a good question or a starting point about where do we stand with them.
I actually do think it's a good question. And the question for me is, should I have higher expectations for the evolution of their marriage and their relationship across all of these movies? Because right now, they feel very much like sort of a James Bond, right? Like every time we come in, we have this character who's sort of frozen in time going through a caper of some sort. There's the wit and the booze, less so in this movie. There's the sarcasm between them, the jokes, the japes, and they're both kind of contributing to their relationship in pretty consistent ways from the first three movies. I haven't seen the rest of them. I don't know what to expect. Should I, by this movie, have higher expectations that they're going to that we get any feeling of change between these characters, or is that just not what I'm in for the Thin Man series?
Yeah, it's hard to gauge what we're going to expect. I will say something that I can't say it's new to this particular film, but something that I did enjoy is it depicts a relationship that I feel there is a sense of maturity to the way that they handle their relationship, where they understand, sometimes there might be a cute girl who thinks that Nick is cute. Sometimes there might be a hot guy that thinks Nora is cute. But they handle all that well.
There's a gaggle of dudes hanging out with her at the club.
Yeah. But it's like there's this level of confidence and trust in their relationship that I do really enjoy. And I enjoy the way that they play that. Those moments work really well. And I thought it was kind of cute how Nora, in this particular film, latches on early to some former girlfriends or lovers that Nick had. Like, she discovers these names and she drops them at this particular club as a way to just kind of see if she can get under his skin at all. And I liked the way that their relationship had those moments, because it never felt like they were concerned about a weakening of what they had. It just always felt like, a further opportunity to kind of explore their lives together.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And I think, part of that answers my question. Like, I don't think I should have much higher of an expectation that their relationship is going to become more sophisticated, because, in fact, it's exactly probably where it needs to be. But, corollary question, does the baby screw it up in any way for you? I read a little bit of commentary that suggested that introducing the baby made the humor a little bit less biting. And maybe the fact that there is a baby in the picture now meant that some of the risks they would even push against the Hays Code, right, at this time, and might have restricted some of the boozing, some of the consistent drunkenness on behalf of Nick.
There's definitely something to that. I mean, just the fact that he is drunk, like visibly drunk, never in this film, might speak to the fact that per the Hays Code, they wanted to make sure that they were depicting the parents as competent people who weren't going to be just drunk around their kid all the time, but who were actually parenting the child. And so that might be something that came from all that.
I wonder. I mean, I think that is an interesting sort of angle. Now, it does lead for me, speaking of other things that, are depicted on film, the old man, right? The Colonel.
Right.
I mean, I liked him. I thought he was fun and funny. I do think it's interesting that they take this old guy and make it seem like he's crazy. Like this is a gaslighting storyline, right? When we first meet him. That's your sense?
Weird storyline. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Now that we're getting into the caper, this is part of what makes it feel like a very strangely cobbled together mystery. And I struggled a little bit with him and the way he was portrayed, because he could very well have been going into dementia, right? But they never would have talked about that on screen.
No, it really boils down to this weird logic that Church has to basically tell the Colonel that he has these dreams and they always come true. Or when he has the third one, it's like a vision. And when the third one happens, it always comes true. And like he tells him that, like, I see you die. And oh no, I just had the third dream. That must mean you're going to die. And it's like, what? And the fact that the Colonel buys into this nonsense is like, that was a strange leap for the story to take, as far as like, this is what we're buying into as far as the foundation for these characters. And the fact that Church has this whole plan as we kind of get to the end, and their whole reveal about how Church has this plan put together where he is going to use all of this to create basically faux alibis, so that, when he does potentially have somebody kill the Colonel, that he's completely covered. And I'm just like, God, this is like, what is this strange plot that we're getting? That was pretty strange to me.
Yeah, I thought so too. Like the whole idea that we're going to make this guy think he's nuts to deliver these alibis to get away. I mean, it was just super, super convoluted. I will say, though, I do like C. Aubrey Smith as the Colonel. He's fantastic. And like, you just do a scroll down his credits and see how many non-military officers, knights, earls he's played. He's always the stereotypical kind of Englishman, and is really fun to watch. And his mustache is just perfect. And I mean, everything about sort of how he portrays the character on screen is great. I just feel like it's done cheaply.
Yeah, I don't think it does his character any service either. Especially because in the end, like, how is it doesn't even tie in to any of the actual plot as to his killing, which is completely not related to any of that. So, it's like Lois, the Colonel's daughter, was almost using all of that to her advantage to kind of speed things up so she could get basically her inheritance early.
Yeah, right. What a banal, like, twist. Like, that is the cheapest sort of low-hanging fruit that you could take. And then there were these two guys. The two, like, other guys that were hanging around. One was the boyfriend and one was the crush suitor, and I can't remember their names off the top of my head.
Dudley was her fiancé.
Yes.
And Freddie was the Colonel's secretary, but he wasn't from money, but he's the one who secretly had a crush on Lois and wanted to take care of her. And he's the one who would stand up for her, whereas Dudley would not stand up for her. And so that was kind of a difference of those two characters.
They, again, were fairly milquetoast, though I kept calling them the Hardy Boys in my head because they looked like the Hardy Boys to me.
Well, Patrick Knowles played Dudley. I don't remember if we talked about him much, but he played Will Scarlet in The Adventures of Robin Hood. So certainly something that we did cover on the show. And Tom Neal, we talked about in one of my favorite noir films. He was in Detour.
1945. Maybe that's why he looks like a Hardy Boy. I think everybody in Detour looked like a Hardy Boy.
To a certain extent, you get these movies put together and you have to create a big cast of all sorts of savory and unsavory characters that can potentially be the killer, and the rest of them all need to be kind of crafted in a way where they end up being the red herring. And that's essentially what we get with all of this. And Dudley is, I don't know if he's ever considered a red herring, but, it doesn't matter because he ends up being the second murder. And so then we've got the two bodies and we're trying to figure out, okay, who killed these two? And so, it does set something up, but it never, I don't know. I felt like those characters were a lot less interesting than anyone we had in the last film.
I think that's a great point, because the degree to which the movie is successful is the degree to which all of those characters ends up feeling like they fit. And that's the problem that I have here. Even in the last movie, where it was just a bunch of old people, by the time everything is resolved, I felt like I understood where everybody fit. And I don't have that feeling here. One that we do get back in this movie that was not in the last movie but was in the first one is Lieutenant Guild.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Guild is back, and played by Nat Pendleton. I feel like he's degraded since the first movie.
I feel like what happened is because he seemed a little more in the first movie. You're getting to know your characters, and he had a lot more doubts about Nick in the first movie, and so you kind of buy into the fact that this is a cop, and Nick is coming in as this detective who is kind of getting in the cop's way, and you get more back and forth between them. By the time we get to this film, it's like everybody who knows who Nick is, like kowtows to him. Like, oh, you're just the best, Nick, and you never get anything wrong, Nick, and we'll do whatever you need, Nick. And that's kind of what happened to Lieutenant Guild. It was kind of a strange shift for his character that, there's not as much there. It's a lot more flat.
Nat Pendleton was a wrestler. He ended up playing a lot of what are referred to as dim bulb characters. That's what I felt like we got here. We got more of a character in the first movie, and he became a, quote, dim bulb character in this movie. He was much more of a transparently fawning dummy in this movie. I didn't care for it.
Otto Kruger plays the other cop. He's the one who's now working on the case. He's not a cop. He's the assistant DA. And would you say that he's kind of now filling in as Lieutenant Guild? I mean, I don't know if I guess I'm not really sure if that's the right way to phrase the question, because it's like, is he there to basically do what Lieutenant Guild was doing in the first movie as somebody who had a little more doubt, or does he end up being kind of like Lieutenant Guild Jr.?
I wonder, because part of the doubt in this movie is framed in the doubt that we get when he shows up at the estate. Everybody pulls a gun on Nick and Nora. Everybody pulls a gun. And there is always some sort of a rescue that, oh, no, we can trust him. Somebody always has to come to the rescue. But that is such superficial doubt about his character, right? It's still doubt on screen. I get it, but it's superficial. And I think where the last movie plays is, and the first movie for sure, is where characters of weight, characters of importance actually have doubt about Nick Charles and about what he's doing. And that was the police, that was the attorney, that was whoever it was. I feel like we have less of a character to actually test Nick Charles. And maybe that's because we're in movie 3. Maybe we're just supposed to know. Maybe we've defined that Nick Charles is, he is the investigator par excellence, and that now he's just a fish out of water in this little place. Once everybody gets to know him, everybody already knows what he's capable of, and we're just supposed to buy into that. We don't need anybody testing the veracity of his claims or of his skill. Maybe that's where we are. I found it a little empty.
Well, and maybe to our point earlier in the conversation, like maybe this is what William Powell needed as he was getting back into film, something that was a little easier on him, that wasn't going to tap him out and didn't require as much work.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why he's kind of, everything is kind of the way it is, where, he's just there for all these other characters.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why that is, but I think you're right. Back to Otto, I think there is something to that. The fact that he is here playing that particular sort of nemesis, it's just not as strong, so I struggle with that. Just wanting more. There is the other goofy guy, though. Who is it with the glasses? What's his name? Diamondback?
Vogel. That's Diamondback Vogel, yeah.
What'd you think of him?
Well, again, it was designed to be kind of a character who you definitely had suspicion of, and then it just kind of, I don't know, his character, like his whole storyline just kind of like fizzles a bit at the end. I'm like, okay, well, it wasn't that exciting. He's an interesting character, but he's always kind of designed to be the one who seems like the baddest of them all.
Right. Do you know who he is, though, Andy? Like, it feels like we've got a this character shaped hole in these movies, because in the last movie it was the doctor who was drugging what's her name to keep her upstairs. Right. It was the doctor who was drugging the cousin on the payroll of Aunt Catherine or whatever her name was. Like, he was a character who was totally underused, could have been a real villain in this thing. Like, he could have really been a part of it, but he just was kind of relegated to a side character. I felt the same way about Diamondback. I thought it was such a cool character design. Like, they made such interesting choices. It was almost General Tot, right, in Indiana Jones. Like, I felt like that is an potentially iconic character from this movie that was woefully underused. Like, let's talk about why he's diabolical. His name is Diamondback. Why is his name Diamondback? And
right.
We never got any of that.
No, got very little with him. It's frustrating.
Yeah.
And then you get the friends like Harry Belliver as creeps who we meet. There's always that character. This is something else that we've seen in the last couple films where it's a criminal or a former criminal who's in some capacity trying to go straight. And they've taken a job, but they're not doing a very good job at it. And they keep falling into their old ways until they realize that it's Nick and or Nora that they're stealing from. And in this particular case, that's exactly what happens, where Creeps is looking at stealing stuff from the house, and then he realizes that it's Nick's place, and then he's like, oh, I guess so much for this costume, and he takes off his bellhop uniform. I'm just like, what a weird set of side characters that they end up having. But those are the fun ones, and I liked Harry Belliver. He plays the character, he was in the Hot Rock. I don't know if you remember Rollo the bartender, but he was in that. So it's kind of fun to see somebody on such opposite ends of his career.
For sure.
But like those characters that you have, I did enjoy probably more than, and maybe it's just because their characters didn't have to get tied into such complex story threads that seemed to kind of fizzle and go nowhere.
Yeah. Well, and to that end, we should talk about Phil Church and Dum Dum.
Yeah. Right.
And Smitty.
Right.
The three of them. Because they, again, that entire sort of storyline ends up being kind of a MacGuffin.
Yeah, because, Church is, we talked about his plan already, how he was creating these fake visions to make alibis for himself. I don't know, the whole thing was so peculiar. He had Smitty and Dum Dum working with him. But then as we find out that Lois, the Colonel's daughter, has created this alternate life for herself where she actually is in love with Church, and they've been kind of doing a lot of this stuff. And I don't know. it was, again, such a convoluted story. And I mean, the actors were fine. I thought their performances worked and everything. They all get mired in the complexities of the plot with Church and his visions that, for me, just made it harder to deal with.
I did like seeing Abner Biberman as in the role of Dum Dum, and it's kind of a weird role, with the accent, and it's just a little bit touchy. But he has been he's one of the faces that it feels like have kind of been around for a while in some of these some of these classic films that he just was very, very familiar to me. And it was just neat to see him in this, in this old movie. He started his career not long before this. I mean, it was his first film was 1936. Ended up doing, I think, 8 or 10 movies before he hit another Thin Man. He was in the Roaring Twenties and His Girl Friday and South of Pago Pago, Golden Gloves. He's just in a lot of these kinds of studio pictures. And
well, just in 1939 alone, it looks like he was in 11 films.
Yeah, it's that crazy.
So, yeah. Just bonkers.
In all of these movies. And I'm not sure, I haven't seen all of them, but I'd be surprised if they were huge roles.
Well,
like this
1, 2, 3 of them he's uncredited. So obviously he was just there as a character in there at some point.
Yeah. So that was fun. And of course, Sheldon Leonard as he plays Church.
Right.
And he ended up doing a lot of production on, as executive producer eventually on a lot of classic shows, Andy Griffith and I Spy and Gomer Pyle and
Dick Van Dyke.
So he's been, he ended up changing gears pretty dramatically.
Yeah.
Danny Thomas Show, 289 episodes producer.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a long run.
Well, and then you get someone like Marjorie Main, who's a fantastic character actress, coming in as the landlady of the apartment block where Lois has this apartment rented under a pseudonym. And she's just always great. And she's just one of those faces that you just know from being in so many of these films of the era. And, I don't know. I guess she's also somebody that, you may not have ever seen like Ma and Pa Kettle, any of the Ma and Pa Kettle films, but you likely have seen an image of her as Ma Kettle in those films because that kind of became such a huge part of her life from like the 40s through the 50s where she was just that character, and like every other movie that she was making was another Ma and Pa Kettle movie.
That's funny. I don't think I've ever seen any of those.
I don't think I have either, but it's like you say Ma Kettle, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's her. And so she's just one of those people she does this sort of role. Like she was the Dude Ranch owner in The Women, which we talked about a while ago. She's in one of our family, like one of the musical favorites that we just love, Meet Me in St. Louis. And so, yeah, she's in tons of stuff. So she's just a great character actress who pops up and does her job well. And again, it's those sorts of characters in this who I gravitate to more than some of these actors who are in the more complicated stories like Church.
Asta is back. We don't have a family story with Asta the dog, but I can't believe I hadn't done this before, but Asta got quite a lot of work.
And Asta was actually Skippy, we should say.
Between 1932 and 1945. Yes, Asta was credited as Skippy, uncredited for most of his career. Thin Man, after the Thin Man, he was credited, it looks like, as Asta until he was credited as Skippy in Topper Takes a Trip. But this is a dog that got work. 23 films.
We haven't really talked about Lois. Virginia Gray played Lois as the daughter, as the person who ends up being the killer. What do you think of Lois? And do you buy her relationship with her father, with her fiance and friend, with Nick and Nora? Like, what do you think of her?
I'll tell you right where I stopped buying things. She gets shot in the hand, like shot in the arm, right?
Yeah.
In the woods. So that's all fine. Where it starts to fall apart at the end for me is that she's locked in a bedroom. That's the end, is she's locked in a bedroom. And while everything else plays out, and that feels like such a terrible way to resolve the caper. Like there's no joke to it. It's not funny. It's not mysterious or threatening. It is just, we're going to take a character off the field so we don't have to think about them for a little bit while we're working with all these other characters. And I felt like that was a little bit cheap.
Well, and also it's like, why is he doing that if not because he suspects her? Like it's a strange thing to do at that point where suddenly you're kind of thrusting this suspicion onto this character that you might not have suspected already. And so that is potentially like giving it away, because it is an odd thing that he just kind of traps her in the bedroom until he needs her.
Right. And so what did I think of her generally? Like, I think she's fine. I think she's great. I like that, there is tension between her and her family. There is a lot of great tension build up in the family dynamic, and it's all fine. It's all fine. I don't remember, like, as I was watching it, when I called it, but I felt like I called it kind of, a little bit later in this movie than the other one, just because it was more confusing. Like I couldn't kind of pull it together. And so it was a little bit, it just was kind of empty calories, but I like her a lot. I like Virginia Gray. I think she's wonderful.
Well, it was an interesting story thread, though, because clearly, like, it was a point in time where people were a little, like, accusing a woman of murder seemed to be a bigger deal, because as Nick is kind of going through the process, even his wife is like, hey, slow down there, Nick. You're saying some pretty awful things about her, which you don't get that reaction when he's accusing James Stewart in the last film. But in this film, it's like, whoa, you're accusing a lady of this stuff. You're crossing a line here. And so that was an interesting element to the story, the fact that there was that reaction at this time to the idea that a woman could be a killer. Yeah,
that's true. I didn't put that together. That's a complicated screen relationship to actually be able to sell it. I didn't actually have any problems with that either. Like by the end of the movie, I was bought into the way they were telling me he was kind of resolving the story. It didn't feel out of place at all, and that part at least felt earned. But again, coming with a lot of baggage in having seen more women criminals on screen.
Yeah, since then, right. One element that I really just didn't care for is the element with the new nanny. Ruth Hussey plays the new nanny, and she's a fine actress. But, like, what a weird thread to throw in as a possible red herring, where we have her sneak out that first night when the colonel's killed, only to not show up again until the very end when she comes to apologize. I'm like, why it was just like such a lethargic attempt at some other mystery to be thrown into the story. Did you think much of that storyline?
The same motivation behind locking Lois in the bedroom, that it was just like the lowest way to establish, like the easiest route to establish intrigue is having her sneak off with that look on her face in the dark, looking back over her shoulder as she disappears into the night. And I honestly thought this was going to end up being my biggest complaint. As it was happening, as we neared the end of the movie, I thought, are they going to forget that she was there?
Right,
it just feels like that's a thread we're not going to tug on until the last minute. Like it felt unresolved.
Yeah. A little frustrating.
So I didn't care for that either. You're making me really not like this movie as much.
Well, I mean, it's fine. It's a fine film. And again, Nick and Nora are just a delight, and they have some great moments. Like I genuinely really enjoy the scene in the club where they kind of end up, again, I don't know why the lights always get turned out when something happens, but as the fight starts with the strange eavesdropper, the lights turn out, and suddenly Nick and Nora, when the lights come back on, they're on the dance floor. She's no longer with the guy that she had been with, and they're just dancing. And it was like, it was really cute. Like there were some genuinely really cute moments throughout the film, but it just doesn't have the levels of laughs that the previous one did. And I feel like I don't know if this is what we're in for the rest of the series, or if this is just, as we've said, perhaps they were trying to do something that was a little easier for Powell at the time because of everything that he had been going through. So hard read on this one. It's a fine film. It doesn't stand up to the previous two.
Absolutely. That's where I stand too.
Well, we will be right back. But first, our credits.
The next reel is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. Music by Matan Govari, Oriel Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm. And if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. How to Do It award season, Andy. Was this the biggest, most stunning entrant into the award circuit that year?
You know, we've talked about it even in our last show that this is a period of time where just there aren't a lot of awards out there. It's very minimal. The Oscars are out there. That may, I don't know the history of all the rest of when they started, but I mean, the Oscars may be one of the primary ones that was happening at this point in time. This one got nothing. Not a single nomination for anything. So I think people were just happy to see them back on screen. That was their award.
You know, I think the award ended up taking, 70 years to actually pay back. And that award is us being able to mention Eddie Mannix again.
Oh, yes, that's right.
How to Do at the box office.
Well, as you said, we are back celebrating the joys of the Eddie Mannix Ledger. Oh, I just love that guy and his detailed budget notes on MGM movies, I tell ya. Nick and Nora's next adventure cost $1,107,000, or nearly $20.4 million in today's dollars. That is a definite increase from the last one. The movie opened November 17th, 1939, opposite Tower of London, starring Basil Rathbone and Boris Karloff. This movie did well for itself, but it's 1939. That is a tough year to make a mark in the top 10, which this didn't. But it did earn $2,223,000, or nearly $41 million. That lands it with an adjusted profit per finished minute of almost $200,000. Again, a drop from the last one, but still a popular film.
All right. So I'm still trucking along with these movies. Like I said, I love this couple so much that I'm able to forgive an awful lot. So here we are, third one in. I'm still on this train. I'm glad we're doing this.
Still on this train. Me too. I'm enjoying the stories. And yeah, while this one didn't wow me, especially after the second time where I didn't even remember having had previously watched it until partway through. I'm like, Oh yeah, I had seen this one.
Telling.
That's very telling. But it's still an easy thing to enjoy. So there it sits. Well, we'll be right back for our ratings. But first, here's the trailer for next week's movie, Shadow of the Thin Man.
Boy, oh boy, wait till I tell the family I met Nick Charles and Mrs. Charles. This is Mrs. Charles, isn't it?
That's the way we check in at motels.
No one will get a word out of me, Nick. It's okay, honey.
Okay, let's go.
Mama goes home.
Oh, Nicky, you know you click better when I'm around.
Not in a men's shower. I tell you what, you go home, cold cream that lovely face, slip into an exciting negligee.
Yes.
And I'll see you at breakfast. Stick 'em up or I'll blow you in two.
Oh, don't shoot, Nicky, it's me!
One thing about a murder case, if you just let people talk long enough, sooner or later, somebody spills the beans. Well, somebody has.
Is it me?
Yeah, Nick, is it her?
Nick, who is it?
I didn't go near the track that day, and I can prove it.
And I haven't killed a jockey in weeks. Really?
Letterboxd, Andy. You know Letterboxd. Letterboxd is our favorite social network for movie lovers. You can keep all your reviews there, all your ratings. You can track your film diary. And if you fall in love with it like we have, you can pay to remove ads and support the team but that brings Letterboxd to us. You can get a pro or patron membership with 20% off. All you have to do is use the discount code NEXTREEL at checkout, or we've made it easy. Just visit thenextreel.com/letterboxd, and you will be whisked over to the purchase page with that 20% already cleaved off the total. So save you a few bucks. All right, what are you going to do for this movie, Andy?
Throwing the word cleave around.
I know. You just cleave it right off.
That's impressive.
Sever 20% directly from the limb.
That's horrible. Just like slitting that dog's throat. Oh.
Oh, yes, just exactly like that. Isn't everybody really excited to go get a Letterboxd membership now? Really doing it justice. All right. Remember American Psycho, everybody? We're going to do that thing. You're covered with plastic, and then you can get 20% off.
You got to cleave it somehow.
Yep.
Something's got to come off. For this film, I walked into this conversation at a 3.5 and a heart, and I feel like we've actually dropped my rating, where I think I'm just going to give it 3 stars and a heart. That's where I will sit.
Yeah, I'm exactly there. The first 2 movies, I was a 4-star and a heart. And watching this movie, actually, and if you remember, I put a bookmark in the last episode because there's a chance that one will go up from there for me. And part of that is because I want to see how the rest of these play out. So this one has definitely fallen, but so I'm a 4.43 so far.
All right.
For the series. But it's still, if you look at IMDb, it's still a 7.4.
Yeah,
It handily crests the 6-star IMDb scale.
People love Nick and Nora. I mean, they're great characters.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it stands the test of time.
I'm on the Nick and Nora train.
Yeah. Well, as Pete said, don't forget to visit thenextreel.com/letterboxd to get your patron or pro membership. It does work for renewals as well. And you know what? We also have a membership where you get early access to all your shows. You get monthly member bonus episodes. You get extra content at the start and ends of your episodes. All sorts of great stuff. You can just go to thenextreel.com/membership and you can learn about our own membership plans. So what did you think about Another Thin Man? We would love to know. Hop into the Show Talk channel in Discord, where we will be talking this week about the movie.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd giveth Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
Oh, man. Letterboxd has reminded us of something that's really important that we didn't talk about. That's just kind of weird in this movie.
Boy, did they. Yeah.
Should we do it at the same time? Do you want to do it at the same time?
Sure. 1, 2, 3. Mommy.
Drink every time William Powell calls Myrna Loy mommy.
Oh, so
what was yours? Did I jump too hard on your line?
No, I wasn't reading were we reading our reviews?
Yeah, I was reading my review.
I thought we were just saying mommy. You threw, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I was so confused.
No, I did. I changed the rules
All I
of
said
the
was
game
mommy.
as I
I
was
thought we
playing
were
it.
letting where our direction went
Mommy.
of our conversation.
Well,
So I
that's
just
the
said
truth.
mommy.
The bottom line is it's mommy.
Yes.
That he calls her mommy all the time. And it turns out all the reviews on Letterboxd are about mommy. And we didn't even mention it once.
Oh, that's so funny.
What was yours?
Mine's a 3-star by Amanda, who says Nick called Nora mommy 1,000,000 times, but we all know he meant MILF.
Yours is better. Yours is absolutely better. I'll take it. Thanks, Letterboxd. It is hard to believe we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, you're telling me. Producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you, and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
The originals page at thenextreel.com/originals links to the source material from all of our adapted film discussions. Purchasing through our links support the show at no extra cost to you.
In Season 12, The focus was big franchises and series. We covered both Paddington films, adapted from the beloved children's book character created by Michael Bond.
Oh, I love those films so much.
Hugh Grant is perfect.
For our Pitch Perfect series, the first film was adapted from Mickey Rapkin's nonfiction book about collegiate a cappella competitions.
It's like a short story of my life, literally. I lived college a cappella.
Sing it, brother.
I lived college a cappella.
I didn't mean literally.
You know who you're talking to, right? The Twilight Saga dominated the season with 5 films adapted from Stephenie Meyer's vampire romance novels, Twilight, New Moon, Eclipse, and the 2 Breaking Dawn parts.
Dominated with awkward romance and nonsense logic is more like it.
That too.
Another Thin Man brought us back to Dashiell Hammett's only Thin Man sequel based on other Hammett material, The Farewell Murder, that wasn't just based on the characters from the first film.
We talked about Trainspotting and its sequel, T2 Trainspotting, adapted from Irvine Welsh's novels.
I hate the sequel's name.
I do too.
And the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy adapted from J.R.R. Tolkien's epic fantasy series.
Love these.
Extended editions all the way, baby.
Plus, all the Mission Impossible films based on the 1960s TV series.
And we've still got at least one more to go.
Members got to hear us chat about The Hustler and The Color of Money, adapted from Walter Tevis's books.
Get all of these books and more at our originals page, thenextreel.com/originals.
Start your next read from the movies we've covered at thenextreel.com/originals.